In the heart of Sydney's now bohemian inner west lies a dark secret. In one Erskineville Terrace, which used to be a working class area in those days, a man tried to cut out his lover's heart with a razor. Catherine Johanna Sims was murdered by her partner Alfred Patrick Ball on March the 16th, 1932, after he discovered a love letter from another man living in Cardiff, Wales. This discovery prompted a vicious attack on the victim, who was desperate to escape a violent man. Ball claimed that he lost consciousness. This would set a unique precedent for legal defense at the time. Neighbors rushed to the home after hearing Catherine Sims' moans. Ball reportedly answered the door covered in blood and said he had been killing fowls, but fled through the back of the house when neighbors saw Sims' partner in her death throes in a pool of blood. During his attempted escape, he dropped the murder weapon, a straight razor, which had snapped during the frenzied attack on his de facto partner. Ball rushed to the house of Catherine's niece, Mary Thomas, explaining to the niece of his victim that he had been robbed by a gang. Shortly thereafter, he visited a friend's house, cleaned himself up and changed his clothes. The story starts here. It's simple, but a terribly sad story. Catherine was still very young when she first married, but the marriage ended unhappily and she obtained her freedom in the divorce court. Then she started anew and found employment at Bakewell's brickyards and tile kilns. And it was here that she met Alfred Patrick Ball. The fates were not to be kind to her. He fell in love with her and brooded morosely when his clumsy attempts at the courting ritual were not met with any positive acknowledgement. He complained to his fellow workmates, "I don't know what's wrong with me, but that piece won't have me at all." He used to follow her about. Today they would call it stalking. Back then it was called devotion. Fate would play its cruel hand when her sister died. Stunned with grief and confronted with expense, Ball suddenly popped up with aid, sympathy and a place to stay. He provided money and affection, and she felt obligated to reciprocate this affection. And so she reluctantly moved in with Ball. 11 years pass, 11 years close to the borderline of hardship and poverty, with the exception of a period when they had run a sly grog shop, which had brought them to comparative but short-lived affluence. The story leaps swiftly to February of 1932, when Catherine went for a holiday to Cardiff in Wales, and for the first time in her sad life, the promise of true love blossomed during her stay. Fast forward again to the morning of March the 16th. In the front bedroom of their home in Union Street, Erskineville, Ball killed Catherine by dreadfully hacking at her with a razor. Then, surprised in the act, he fled. It took the police nearly 2 months to find him. His explanation when finally apprehended, that he went mad when he got the letter and that his mind became a blank for 24 hours, was accepted by the jury. The shrewd criminal attorney Mr. Robert Sproul had called upon Dr. Hazlitt Fraser, who declared that if Ball told the truth when he said that his mother was an epileptic and his father a drunkard, that he fell on his head, that he had throbbing headaches and talked in his sleep, if he was telling the truth, then he was such a person who could have suffered a mental lapse, could have committed the crime automatically without knowing what he was doing. The jury recorded a verdict that he killed the woman while temporarily insane. It was a virtual acquittal, particularly as Dr. Hazlitt Fraser declared that Ball was sane. He might have had a brief moment of insanity, but he is sane again, and perfectly harmless. This doctor, an eminent psychologist it can be said, saw Ball for only 30 minutes and gave his evidence from that short amount of time spent with him. Was his judgment as certain as that of Mary Thomas, niece of the dead woman, who had known Ball for more than a decade? Mary Thomas, who had to have police protection because of her fears of Ball, and arrived at the house just as Ball was in the act of murder. When he heard me open the front door, he was stooping down. He straightened up and turned and looked at me. He had done his job. He wasn't mad then, just frightened, scared. He didn't know whether to carve me up or run. When he looked at me after he'd killed her, he was absolutely covered in blood. Blood was dripping from his hands and his arms. It was awful. "You mongrel," I said. "What have you done to her now?" He never answered me, but he beat it. And then I saw the body on the floor. Kit's head had almost been cut off. 3 weeks before he killed Catherine, Ball had beaten her up cruelly. He grabbed her in the kitchen and punched her in the mouth, breaking her false teeth into 5 pieces. Then he got her down on the floor and started to bash her repeatedly. He pounded her face to a pulp and only left off when Mrs. Hughes next door climbed over from her place onto the kitchen roof and shouted to him to leave her alone. He had all the doors and windows locked. When she went to Cardiff for her holiday, her intention was to stay for a fortnight. A fortnight went by and she did not come back. Ball, mad with rage, strangled her canary, and he told the neighbour, "I will cut the bitch's throat when I get hold of her." She finally returned after 6 weeks, which soon thereafter resulted in the beating that broke her false teeth. He beat her up so brutally that she carried a black eye to her grave. After hearing the verdict, Catherine's niece said, "The doctor saw him for only half an hour. I have known him for years. He's not mad, just cunning. Pity the doctor wasn't there to help Kit. She's dead. And the lawyer, Mr. Sproul, he would not let me talk. He just asked me questions, and then when I went to say anything, he just said, 'Now, I didn't ask you that. Just answer my questions.'" Mary spoke of her aunt, saying, "She was good to him too. His clothes were always clean, his shirts were a good colour, and he never wanted for tobacco. She bought it for him. And when they kept a sly grog shop in Rochford Street, she brought him a dray turnout so he could work for the council. Afterwards he went and sold the turnout for £40 and drank the lot. He was a rotter." Finally, with the intervention of the media, this evidence was brought to the attention of the proper authorities. Mary Thomas contradicted Ball's claims of a momentary lapse in judgment. She said he was routinely violent, and although Ball claimed he didn't know how to read, he had found the letter 3 days before committing the crime. The Crown Law could not ignore Mary's revelations. The Minister of Justice, Lewis Martin, vowed to keep Ball in Long Bay Jail under close guard, and the ministry took the necessary steps to ensure he was kept there. Well, my dear friends, I hope you enjoyed what is my first ever Australian vintage crime feature. Yes, I might look into doing some more from my homeland. By the way, any of you who have been on Patreon for a while will know that I'm introducing these shorter bonus versions where there is no pause for the images between the narration. And I've been fiddling around trying different formats to see which one works the best. The first one I ever did was about the missing aeroplane in Australia, and I sort of squashed the text to the side and had the images to the right, and some people complained that the squashed text was difficult for them to read. So I'm trying this one. I think this format is probably the best. I've had to sort of sacrifice the full image for the sake of the text, but I think this works the best for everybody. Well, not everybody probably, but please let me know your feedback about this. But I think this is probably the format I'm going to stay with for the bonus videos, not for the main presentations. I know a lot of you like the images and the animations, etc. But I think for this, it's probably the best. So while researching this case, I came upon this article, For Rent, Sydney Terrace where man cut out lover's heart. And this is the actual house where poor Catherine had her final horrible moments. It's still there, and it's for rent. I wonder if it's got any dark energy still in there. 680 Australian dollars a week you can have this little house. I used to actually drink in Erskineville and Newtown, which is right next to it. It's a very sort of bohemian area. Nowadays, and back in those days, it was sort of very working class, a lot of poverty. But now it's got some great pubs there. Well, at least it was that way when I remembered it. Yeah, so I thought I'd show you that. Also, about the grog bars, the Sly grog bars. They were quite popular in Australia, especially during the, they also had, what's it called, like in America, prohibition. Yeah, they also had like a prohibition there, but I think they allowed drinking, but at very, very limited time. So they would have, maybe it was open for like an hour in the afternoon, and then they would just sort of line up the bar with glasses with a hose and just pour the beer into the glasses, and there was just sawdust on the floor. And the men would just drink until they were dead drunk, basically. So it didn't really work out so well. Yeah, they just got really inebriated very quickly. And these two here, these underworld figures, Kate Leigh and Tilly Devine, they were actually enemies, but they came together for this publicity shot. But I also found some newspapers about Kate Leigh from 1931. Do you remember the ones I talked about under my sister's floorboard? About her time in prison. She was ruling there too. She was sort of the queen of the underworld. Yeah, interesting. There's a lot of interesting history about Sydney once you start looking into it. So we're going to have a quick look at a house that also has a bit of a history that I found out about purely by accident. Wait till you see. Let's have a look and see if we can find it. It may have been demolished or totally renovated by now. So right here was a club that I used to drink at. Great food, very cheap, cheaper beers than pub prices. Clubs are very, RSL clubs, labour clubs are very popular in Australia. Many a happy hour there. But what I wanted to show you, it was either this house or this house. I think it might be this one. Let me just have a quick look. Yeah, unless they've extended, what am I doing here? Unless they've extended, there was a house, it was like 3 stories high. It couldn't have been this. It must have been here. That's where it must have been. Yeah. Can anyone navigate Google Earth? I'm finding. Yeah. Anyway, I think it must have been here. There was plans to knock it down at that time in the late 90s. But it was like a huge Victorian terrace, about three stories high, including an attic. Very old, beautiful old house. It belonged to the club, and they had plans for it, but there was some sort of heritage order on it. I don't know how they got around that. But a friend of mine was squatting in there. Yes, in my wild and woolly dreadlock days. I wasn't squatting. I did have a flat. I paid my rent on time, but he was squatting there. And it had electricity and everything in it, and the club let him stay there because he was like a caretaker looking after it and making sure that no one broke in and vandalized. But one day we were looking behind the fireplace to see, because sometimes people used to put stuff behind the fireplace, interesting stuff, and we found a couple of old rum bottles and a newspaper from the 1950s, and in it was an article about a gangster who had fired machine gun on the police from a property, and the police managed to wound him and capture him. And you wouldn't believe it, the property was actually this house. It was the very same house that the newspaper article was describing. I wonder if the gangster himself somehow got out after his imprisonment and had put that newspaper there. I'll never know, but it's funny how you stumble upon these little snippets of history that that are all but lost to time. Just a shout out here to Amanda, who won the last competition. These were the items she has won and which she received safely, and she wrote a very nice comment here. Hi Oddie, I received my prize for my favourite mug contest today. I'm so excited. I have carefully looked at everything before carefully packing it up again, and it's also incredible. I had surgery last Monday, so this has really brightened my spirits. When I am better healed, I'll head to a frame shop and get them hung up. Thank you so much. Well, Amanda, I hope you get well very, very soon, and I'm sure all my patrons feel the same. Very happy that the presents arrived safely, and more competitions to come. Keep tuned in. Sometimes it's vintage items, and sometimes it's an obsolete oddity mug of your choice. Anyway, I think I have rambled on long enough for this episode. Catch you next time. God bless. Take care. See you later, mates.